Know thyself. Before you can know who you are, you must first know what you are. Forces of nature create patterns of matter. Male and female are patterns of matter. Thus, they are forces of nature. You know what a male animal is from a female animal because it has a pattern. And usually that pattern, if it gives birth and it nurses its young, if it's a mammal, you know that's a female. The other, which is the male of the species, you can separate and say, well, this is a male and this is a female. And it doesn't matter whether it's a dog, a cat, a whale, or a porpoise, or a bird. You can tell that one's a male and one's a female. The females come with eggs. The males don't. So these are just patterns of matter because everything is made out of the same dust of the earth. And that dust of the earth is protons, neutrons, and electrons. And once you see that pattern, you know that those patterns are created by something. If you see water, when you take the stopper out, the water will swirl in a particular direction. That's a pattern of the water. If you're in South America, the water swirls in the other direction. It's called the Coriolis effect. So when you see patterns in matter, you may understand that something that you can't see is causing these patterns. And male and female are patterns. This is called a nautilus shell. This is a particular pattern. From the center, this creature builds these little chambers. And each chamber is a certain size larger than the previous chamber. This particular size is a graduation. This graduation is 1.61. When people discovered that these things are very prevalent in nature, they decided to call it the golden cut. And this became the foundation of what they call the Fibonacci series. Because the first is 1, the second is 2, the next one is the sum of the previous 2. Because 2 and 1 become 3. 3 and 2 become 5. 5 and 3 become 8. 8 and 5 become 13. That's the graduation that you're looking at. And living things have these different proportions. If you measure from the tip of your finger to your wrist, and you take that measurement, and you multiply that times 1.61, you will get the measurement from your wrist to your elbow. Because living things have a particular proportion. And you know that something animates a living thing, although you cannot see what animates it. It's just like leaves. If you see leaves swirling around, you must believe, or some people believe, that it must be the wind that is moving the leaves. But then again, what is moving the wind? Things that you can't see. Things that you cannot see are often responsible for things that you can see. But one of the things that you can get to recognize is a pattern. And when something that you can't see acts on matter, it leaves a pattern. This is a particular pattern. That's Hurricane Katrina. If you notice, it happens to have the same pattern. Each graduation as you go from the center is the same graduation. 1.61 times as you move out from the center. When you look at a spiral galaxy, it's the same pattern. Because forces that you can't see bend matter that you can see. This is how you know that there's something else out there, because you can look at the pattern and go, oh, something made that. Or something is shaping that. And male and female are shapes of matter. That's another spiral galaxy. Now, when things come from the non-physical into the physical, we will see patterns in the physical, but something started that you can't see, all right? and they're usually a chronological order. In the top row, things start with neutral before they can become positive or negative, because neutral defines what positive and what negative is. Center defines what left and right is. So you can't have left and right without center. And you can't have positive and negative without neutral. But you can't really touch neutral, and you can't touch center. You can touch left and you can touch right. But you can't touch the center because it's a point of reference. But it has to be there. When it comes into the physical realm, if you notice this other line over here, let me see if this pointer works. Right. This pointer here. Before you can have plus A or minus A, you have to start with A. Now, when you see the physical manifestation of these principles, it looks like the neutron, the proton, and the electron. Because it's a trinity. Because positive, negative, and neutral is a trinity. Left, right, and center is a trinity. It's not a duality. We can think in terms of left and right. But we have to understand that center is there. Even though you can't touch it, even though you can't pick it up, it's got to be there. So the trinity of left, right, and center gives us the horizontal plane. The trinity of neutral, positive, and negative gives us the vertical plane. These are constructed from principles. The neutron, the proton, and the electron create the physical matter that we understand. From that, the forces of nature, which are fire, air, earth, and water, are considered to be different states. They're considered to be cardinal, fixed, and mutable. Cardinal means it's moving and it's constantly in motion, like a river or like a current of air. When you have something that's fixed, it means it's not moving at all. And when you have something that's mutable, that means it's changing around, not going anywhere in particular. So cardinal fire, mutable fire, and fixed fire. Cardinal fire is Aries. Fixed fire is Leo, and mutable fire is Sagittarius. If you notice how this is laid out, the fire moves the air moves the water, and the water moves the earth. These are how the elements operate on each other. So when you look at the zodiac chart, you find that Aries is next to Taurus because the fire doesn't do much with the earth. You'll never find fire next to air, and you'll never find water next to earth. They're always separated so that they can keep balance, because otherwise they interact. So from these forces comes life. And life has three different characteristics. There's that which can reproduce itself, which is the XX chromosome. That which is female, which is the XX chromosome, and that which is male, which is the XY. This is a physical manifestation of principles. Just like the principle of the neutron, proton, and the electron. From the neutron, I can make a proton and an electron. Because when you look at the size, you'll see that the neutron is 100%, the proton is 99.9%, and the electron is that little piece that's left over. This idea of duality comes into the mind of man basically because it's an idea that 1 and 1 is 2. But the addition and subtraction cannot operate when there's just one thing. If you start with one thing, you can't use addition and subtraction. It doesn't work. But you start out as one cell and you become billions of cells. So how does that happen? It's not happening through addition, not happening through subtraction. But nature has started with one and makes many. So when you think of duality as just being two things, usually you have the phrase and. It says the world of duality requires a fulcrum point known as and. please feel free to add the following. Add to the following. Up and down, high and low, north and south, left and right. If you think that there's just two things, it's because that there's something else that you can't see. But that other duality is always going to be a three-part equation. The thing that separates the other two. The fact that we're a manifestation of that, it's like before we come into existence, we spend 9 months in the womb and we're not breathing. And then when birth happens, we take our first breath. And many times for most of our life, we think of breath as being inhale and exhale. But there was the original state that you were in before, which was holding your breath. So there's a trinity of states. Hold your breath, inhale and exhale. And you started with hold your breath. So we manifest this same principle. This is another example. From the top down, this is if you take the neutral and you put it in the center, you're going to have left and right or positive and negative. When you have a scale, you might have one thing on one side and one thing on the other, but in the middle, you have to have the fulcrum in order for the scale to work. So you may just observe the two sides, but then again, without that fulcrum, that scale doesn't work. So it's always going to be three parts. Dualities continue to be a three-part equation. So don't get caught in the idea that there's just two things. Because that doesn't happen in nature. It might happen in man's mind that there's just two things, but nature doesn't work like that. Nature is either a singularity or it's a trinity. And it goes from a singularity to a trinity. The one becomes two. Center becomes left and right. Center doesn't just become left, or there's not like left and center or right and center. Center becomes left and right. Neutral becomes positive and negative. So it goes from 1 to 3. And we're manifestations of these same principles. So duality is just, that thing that happens with 1 and 1 is 2. But that is a presumption that there's an infinite number of things to start with before I can apply this little principle, right? I have one thing over here and one thing over here, and I go 1 and 1 is 2. And then I can have addition and subtraction. But the presumption is faulty. Because if you have only one thing, you cannot use this addition and subtraction principle. So they taught you this about addition and subtraction. But then they go on and tell you that multiplication is a complex form of addition and division is a complex form of subtraction. And that if you can multiply, then you can prove whether or not your answer is right by using addition. You remember that? So, but they'll also tell you that when you multiply two negative numbers together, you get a positive result. Have you heard that? Can you prove it in addition? Well, what do they tell you? Hold that thought, right? That's all I can tell you. Now, if you have two values that are less than 1, and you multiply those two values together, you don't get more, you get less. If I multiply 0.5 times 0.5, what do I get? Anybody? 0.25. Can you show me that in addition? So this process fails because of the presumptions that it's based on, because the presumptions are faulty. There's not an infinite number of things to start with. This is the reason why it really doesn't work. And they have this other thing where they have squares and square roots. Squaring is a complex form of multiplication, which we know fails pretty easy. And then square roots is a complex form of division. So when they say, well, give me the square root of the number 2. Well, what two numbers could you multiply together to get the value 2? Hold that thought. That's all I can tell you. Meanwhile, nature has been expanding and contracting since the beginning of time, without addition and subtraction. So if you want to understand what nature's doing, do you think addition and subtraction is going to help you? Yeah, right. You're going to have to come up with another formula. Yeah, it's going to confuse you. If anyone is familiar with some of the forms of power, power is in the center, which is, I use in this chart, I have energy and power in the center. E equals mc squared, which means Einstein came up with this formula of energy is equal to the mass, whatever the mass is, times the acceleration, which is c, which is the speed of light. Okay, so power is equal to current squared times resistance. You cannot have power unless you have resistance to the flow. So like if there's a river and it's flowing, unless there's something to resist the flow, you will not see the power. This is how a ship gets pushed by the air, because the resistance is in the keel, which is in the water. And then you'll see the power of the wind being able to move the ship. So this becomes part of these equations, all right? It's always a trinity that you're working with. So when Einstein decided that, not Einstein, his name was Freud. Freud. Freud decided that he was going to study the human psyche. And what did he discover? He found out that there was 3 parts. He called them id, ego, and superego. It's a reflection of a principle. It's not a coincidence. We are 3 parts. We are a trinity. Some past, present, and future, mind, body, and soul. We're a trinity all contained in one. We are the one that has become 3. You just never know who's in the chassis when it's going down the road, who's driving. Is it id, is it ego, or is it superego? When you look at the neutron, the proton, and the electron, they have what they call an atomic weight. The neutron, which is the complete package, they give it an atomic number, but the proton is just about the same. There's just a tiny little particle missing. And the electron is almost invisible. Do you want to see where that reflection of that principle comes in? This is the sperm and the egg. The ratio of the sperm to the egg is very much like the ratio of the electron to the proton. One might think it's a coincidence, or one might think it's a reflection of a principle. But the way we're designed, the human female comes with 600 eggs in each ovary when she's born. Each egg has 1 DNA message. Now, this 1 DNA message is got the building blocks of life. So now a male in 1 ejaculation has anywhere between 300 million to 500 million DNA messages. She has 1, he's got 300 million to 500 million. Why does he have so many messages? Because these are the last messages. These messages contain the last thing he heard, the last thing he saw, the last thing he smelled, and the last thing he touched. She has a message that goes back from the time of her birth, which is an old message. He has the latest there. This is the reason why 2 people who have AIDS can give birth to a child who doesn't have AIDS, because of this same process. Because this process of updating. Because if the egg were just to divide itself, then it would be getting no new information into the system. because that's an old DNA message that she has. She was born with that DNA message. He, on the other hand, has been the scout to go out, find out what's going on, and report back what the situation is out in the territories, so that the new form of life knows what's going on. That's the way the design works. It should inherit the blood type of both, because it has the blood type of both. It's going to decide which blood type, because I guess you can't have two blood types. It's going to say, well, pick one or the other. And I guess maybe it has to be with one was more dominant than the other. It's probably a number of different factors. I'm not sure exactly which. But the fact that the body has different cells in the body, all right? Each cell is supposed to have 46 chromosomes, 23 from the male, 23 from the female. So generally speaking, every cell in the body has 46 chromosomes, except for the sex cells, because the sex cells have to have 23 chromosomes just so that they can accept another 23 from the other donor. So the body has to go through a process called meiosis, which takes a 46 chromosome cell. Then it does this little thing where it does a divide and a copy, so that it breaks the 46 down into two 23 chromosome cells. Sometimes this process does not work well. And what you wind up with is an egg that has 46 chromosomes, because it didn't do the divide and copy right. Now, each ovary comes with about 600 eggs at birth for a woman. So between the two ovaries, she's got 1,200 eggs. Now, hopefully, in order to have every egg having 23 chromosomes, the process worked well. But if it didn't work well, then she's going to have one egg that has 46 chromosomes. And what happens is that creates a situation called parthenogenesis, or virgin birth. No. Right. There was a doctor who was trying to do stem cell research. So what he did, his name was Dr. DeSouza. In his study, he found out that the human embryo in question results not from a fertilized egg, but from an egg that has been tricked into dividing. The British Association meeting in Dublin was told by Dr. Paul DeSouza. He now works in Edinburgh University, but did the work at the nearby Roslin Institute where Dolly the sheep was cloned. It took Dr. Sosa around 300 human eggs to create half a dozen blastocysts, human embryos that consist of around 50 cells, which can be used as a source for stem cells that can be grown into all 200 or so types of cells in the body. So from 300 eggs, he gave an electric shock to 300 eggs, and half a dozen of them started to divide. So he got 6 out of 300. So basically he was looking at 6 bad eggs out of 300. So if a woman comes with 600 eggs in each ovary, what are the odds that one of them might not have gone through the meiosis process? It could be a bad egg. And then all it's waiting for is an electric shock. Could be a handshake after walking across the rug. Although attempts to grow stem cells from the blastocysts have not yet succeeded, as they have in no human primates, Dr. DeSouza was confident it was only a matter of time. The embryos were grown by a process called parthenogenesis, which means virgin birth in Greek. Virgin birth is not unusual. Virgin births for the giant lizards. They had these lizards in these zoos. They call them Komodo dragons. Yeah. And they kept these lizards by themselves, and they were pretty sure they were female. And then all of a sudden, she was pregnant. They went, how did that happen? There have been 2 reported cases of Komodo dragon virgin births. Komodo dragons, the largest lizards in the world, are capable of virgin births. Scientists report of 2 cases where female Komodo dragons have produced offspring without male contact. Tests revealed their eggs had developed without being fertilized by sperm, a process called parthenogenesis. The team wrote in the journal Nature, because of the genetics of this process, he added, her children would always be male. Richard Gibson, an author on the paper and curator at the Zoological Society of England, said, parthenogenesis has been described before in about 70 species of vertebrates, but it has always been regarded to be very unusual, perhaps abnormal phenomena. It has been shown in some snakes, fish, a monitor lizards, and even a turkey, he said. But we have seen this in 2 separate, unrelated female Komodo dragons within a year. So this suggests maybe parthenogenesis is much more widespread and common than previously considered. So when you see someone on Maury's show going, what do you mean he's not the father? If it's not him, who is it? Okay. They just can't find any of his DNA. All they find is her DNA. But they can't find any of his. Because all she had was a bad egg, not a virgin birth. I mean, not a miracle. It's just a bad egg. Or a good egg. Depends on your point of view. All right. Which brings us to contraceptives. Okay. The people who are trying to sell you something bring you sex education because they want you to buy their product. So they're telling you that you can engage in this activity of crossing the pubic triangles, and if you do this, they are guaranteed to be able to protect you. If you use their product, there's no actual guarantees, but they're saying, hey, buy our product, all right? Now, what does the marketing say? Condoms are 97% effective against pregnancy. 97%. That means if you use it 100 times, what do you think is going to happen? 3 times, it's not going to work. Oops. And this is what people, oops. That's what you hear a lot, right? And then you're going to hear this interesting expression that happens with these people who produce this product. They go, they got pregnant by accident. Okay, an accident. Let's see, you're laying there with the heels up in the air and an accident occurred. Okay. I thought that was like getting hit by a bus, and that's an accident. But if they're only 97% effective against pregnancy, how effective can they be against sexually transmitted diseases? If they're only 97% effective against pregnancy. So if you're using one of these products, and there's 365 days a year, and you're using this product daily, somebody's going to have a, quote, accident. Not a blessed event, an accident. Often in this society, the people who are engaged in this intimate activity are not friends, because the society tells you you're not supposed to be doing that with your friends. So, whoever it is that's next to you under the bed and under the covers, the jury may be still out on exactly who that is, but there's one thing you're sure of: it's not your friend. So if your lover pulls a knife on you, don't be surprised. It's not a friend of yours. So when two people who are not friends have an accident, what do you think is the result? You will hear some language about baby mama and baby daddy that you are wondering, how did these people ever get together in the first place? Meanwhile, when you go to people who have been married 50, 60 years, they go, what's the secret? What's the secret? They go, oh, we became friends. Which means that you could have started out as friends. Procreation and recreation. So the people who are trying to sell you this product say that you can engage in procreation as a form of recreation. And our product will protect you. They don't tell you that there's a difference between procreation and recreation. Recreation are things that you can do by yourself. Procreation, though, you need somebody else. You need a partner for procreation, in some cases. Remember we talked about virgin birth. But in most cases, you can do recreation by yourself. But they wouldn't be able to sell their product if they were to tell you that. You see, you should have one room over here for a rec room or recreation, and another room over here where you recognize, your ancestors and higher powers, and, you put on robes, and that's for procreation. And you recognize it for what it is. Meanwhile, in the recreation room, bring Bob, that would be battery-operated boyfriend, and your friends. I can't speak of anybody else's experience, but I discovered orgasm when I was 9. I didn't get around a woman until I was 16. They're not related. Things that you can do by yourself. All right? I mean, you never hear lesbians saying that they got pregnant by accident, right? So there are certain ingredients that you have to have for procreation, and that's crossing the pubic triangles. Right? Right. The bottom-facing triangle is, what is that, the female? No, the up-facing triangle is the male, the phallus. Right, and right. Once you cross the pubic triangles, you will create the energy necessary to open the gateway so that something from the heavens will manifest on earth. Right, that's how we get here, right? The womb is the doorway from the heavens to the earth. And by crossing the pubic triangles, that is like opening the doorway. Our ancestors understood this. And this is why they had planning, and this is one of the things that they had where they had marriages were scheduled even before people were born in many cases. And there were a number of reasons for that. Because through heritage and inheritance, you pass down land and you pass down property and you pass down wealth. So many places in the Bible it says, and I will give thee all of these countries. Well, if I give somebody a country and they want to keep that property within their family, they have to marry within their family. Because as soon as they marry outside of their family, then they're going to lose that wealth and power through the elements of heritage and inheritance. There was a guy who was scheduled to be the King of England, and he decided that he wanted to marry a commoner. And he went on and married a commoner. He was disinherited. This is the reason why family planning was done. Now, when they were doing family planning, they also had the understanding of making animals better and stronger. When you read the story of Jacob and his encounter with his uncle in the Bible, in the story, where he changed all of the herds to spotted by his genetic manipulation? Yeah, Yaqub or Jacob. Yes, that's his other name. You will find that they understood about how the moon moves, that if you plant something in the ground while the moon is gaining light, then the harvest is going to be different. If you put something in the ground while the moon is losing light, then the harvest is going to be different. When they planted seeds in the womb, they understood that. So when they wanted someone who was, if they were going to have a number of children, they would say, oh, well, listen, why don't we get us a Libra, Aries, and a Leo? They chose what they wanted because they understood how to control the stargate or the womb. Now it's spin the bottle, okay? Literally. And who might come through the doorway? Your own worst enemy, okay? And when the expression is the children are picking the parents, yeah, because the parents ain't picking the children. Although they had the science, they don't apply it. Grooming behavior. Once a mammal is born, if it doesn't have a loving touch, it'll die. Why? Because the best embrace that you will ever have is being in the womb where you're surrounded by 98.6 flesh. That's the best embrace you'll ever have. And it's downhill from there once you leave. Once a mammal is born, if it doesn't have a loving touch, it will die. You can give it food, you can give it water, you can give it shelter, but it needs a loving touch. Now, when in human development, this is what this looks like. A child would get a good deal of skin-on-skin or loving touch behavior from the parent once it's born. But as soon as it begins to develop its reproductive body, then the message is, no more lap time. Now, if you want to have a loving touch, you have to commit some sexual act. Meanwhile, nothing else on the planet is taught that, except for us. So if we want to have a loving touch, usually we wind up having accidents, okay? Just trying to get a loving touch. Meanwhile, look at this character here, the one in the middle. He's got his eyes closed. Who are those people that are around him? Those are the ones who love and care for him. What does that look like in our development? Let's see. Once you come out of the room, you meet and become social. You meet other people. There are those who you love and who love you. When you're playing in the sandbox, you meet different other children playing in the sandbox. You go on to roller skate together. Some people you can go to the pool with. Some people you can go to the movies with. Some people on the seesaw with. And usually the experience is that all of these people that are in your life are not the same people to do everything with. But these are people who love and care for you and who you love and care for. But the way it used to be when parents or the elders planned for marriages, because when the elders would get together at certain times of the year, they would go, It was usually the ones who were doing the form of family planning, and it kind of went like this. Barbara, our midwife, is getting old. We're going to need another midwife. Let's see your hands. You've had small hands, and she has small hands. All right? You two will give us a midwife. I will help teach him this, that, and the other. You will help teach him about the herbs, and you will help teach him about the science of this, and you will teach him about the science of that. So who's going to help you to raise this child? All the people who have been in your life, right? Those guys right there. Right. Those are the people who will never leave your life. They love and care for you, and you care for them. They are the ones who are going to help you raise that child. Love. Now, everyone who likes you is not your friend. Just because they're looking at you with a great big smile, don't get it twisted. Jeffrey Dahmer only took home the ones he liked. He liked them. It depends on how you're treated, not whether or not they like you. Everything that's in a cage is usually there because something likes them. Say, I like you. I want to take you home with me, chain you to the radiator. You're my favorite. Got to watch out for that. There is no equality between male and female. When it comes to the predator species, and usually you can tell predators from prey. Anybody know how you can tell a predator from the prey animals? Eyes, right. The ones who are the predators, their eyes face front. The ones who are usually the prey, their eyes are on the side. So usually you can tell who the predators are. But among most predator species, probably all predator species, the most successful predator is the female. Why? Well, remember, they got all the genetic material. And that gives them the best eyesight, because color blindness is usually among the males. How does this appear? What does this look like? When they go shopping, you can't get them out of the store. They see stuff that you couldn't possibly see. They have the best hearing. They got the best smell. They got the best taste, the best touch, the best reflexes, and the best cunning. Most of the killing that's done on planet Earth in the next 24 hours will be done by the female of the species. They are the top of the food chain. You need a killing done, you know who to call. They are natural-born killers at birth. And once they bear their young, they're even more focused and motivated. The embodiment of the nurturing mother and the black widow, all in one. Anybody seen the movie The Gladiators with Russell Crowe? Do you remember when they did the reenactment of the Battle of Carthage? You do? Did you see who was on the back of the chariots? These are the Nubian archers. The Nubian archers were legendary for their accuracy when it came to using a bow and arrow and their ability to kill or maim or wound or, if they wanted to play. But, yeah, that was them. You want a killing done? Get the best predator to do it. The men in the Orient had to pass laws that women could not carry swords. Because it was a bad idea. If you give the most successful predator a weapon, and you have a weapon too, and you're not the most successful predator, and they know how to use it, it doesn't look good. Nah, not going to look good at all. So the men had to get together and pass laws about that. And there was reasons, If a woman with a sword meets a man with a sword, he is dead meat, unless the man knows more than the woman. The founder of the Wing Chun Kung Fu system was a Buddhist nun. Miss Yim Wing Chun was a native of Canton in Quanchuan province in China. The martial arts legend Bruce Lee thought so much of the Wing Chun Kung Fu system that it became the foundation he used to build his own style of Kung Fu, which was called Jeet Kune Do. In the Oriental culture before the gun, the best weapons of war were the sword and the bow and arrow. Such weapons can be made to fit the size of the user. In order to protect their lives, the men had to pass laws that forbid women from carrying swords. Superior weapons in the hands of women is the subject of 2 movies. Anyone see Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon? And Kill Bill 1 and 2. Yes. The reason, yes. Because we're on the radio, we're going to have you step up to the microphone and answer the question. So just take notes, write them down, so you remember to ask them. What women used to do was cheat. They would dress up like a man and pick a fight. No, that's going too far. Because if a man sees another man, it's no big deal. I got my sword, you got your sword. But if they start to, and then you find out it's a woman, they used to do that. In the movie Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, remember when she dressed up like a man? And started fights with the men? And then you got a raven female that's on PMS to deal with. That ain't good. Just imagine Serena Williams with a sword in her hand instead of a tennis racket, and you get some idea of what I'm talking about. Dangerous. Now, the wrap. Among spiders, all right, spiders that build webs are blind, okay? They can't see. So in order to catch their food, they make a web. Because spiders that can see, they just run up and grab it, whatever their food they are. So what has to happen is, in order for the male of the species to approach the female, he has to go and stroke the web and give a sound and a vibration to calm and soothe her so that he can approach her. Otherwise, he's just going to be lunch. So this idea of sending vibrations to the female to be able to calm her down goes back a long way. Just in case you have not clear, that's the male of the species right there, and that's the female. So, yes. You tread lightly is one of the expressions. Right. And it's the wrap that will allow you to go home. Hopefully she's hungry and it's quick. Because if she's not hungry, she'll just play with you to death. This is Hindu. Women were the first ones to create this idol god worship, or the personification of the Most High, right. And this is the personification of a goddess by the name of Kali. Notice around her neck she has heads. And for her waistband she has arms. And in one hand she's got a sword, another hand she's got a trident, and she has a cup to catch the blood when she cuts the head off. Yeah. No. The one that she's standing on is her husband. Well, somebody she's not happy with. In the Hindu religion, demons were considered to be the male of the species. But this is when there was a matriarchy. Because this is like 40,000 years ago. Before God became a man, God was a female, according to them. Yes. Right above her head? Yeah. But if you notice what he has in his hand, in his right hand he's holding a drum. Can you see that? He's holding a drum. No, in order to calm her savage rage, the only thing that'll do it is music. That's why he has the drum. Remember, what was the movie, Avatar? Remember The Color of the People? Right, because in the Hindu, blue was signified as a divinity. That was the color of the skin. They were blue. And there you see her husband playing the drum, and she drops the sword and starts to dance. And notice, and a lot of times, Kali is depicted as a sister. And you see her crew in the back. Yeah, they just go out on the killing rampage, and if they don't hear the music, yeah, right, yeah. So bring your drum.
What is that by the feet?
Huh?
By the woman's feet, what is that?
That's a sword and a skull.
On the other side.
On the other side. Oh, that by the man's feet. That's her husband. This guy character here. And that's a lion cloth or a dead, looks like a dead leopard or something like that with spots. There was a group of women warriors called the Dahomey. And the king of the Dahomey had them as guardians of the palace. There's a book called Amazons of Black Sparta by a guy named Stanley Alpin. And it's an excerpt from the book says, the arrival of the French. The French mainly saw and dealt with the palace guards while trading in slaves and other products. They saw that this group of women held a certain reputation of being strikingly beautiful and brutally loyal. The women could complete moves and shots in 30 seconds with flintlock rifles, having absolute precision in hitting targets. The men could perform the same tasks in 50 seconds, hitting enemy targets with only 50% accuracy. French visitors were impressed with their immense skills regardless of whether victory was attained. Men and women should not compete. It's a bad idea. If the man wants to be successful competing, I think man should invent the game, man should invent the rules, and not tell her what the rules of the game are, or you only give her half the rules, then you stand a good chance of winning. Because there is no even playing field. All right? So if they want to test you, and this happens a lot, I just tell them, give me an F now. I don't take tests. But if they want to challenge you to a game, you need to make up the rules and get what they call a handicap. In other words, a head start. Because if you've only got a Y chromosome and they got an X, and they'll say, oh yeah, you can win, you can win. Don't believe it. Don't fall for it. Muammar Gaddafi, he took a page out of the Dahomey book. Do you know his bodyguards are women? Yeah, right. Well, they're the best ones at it. Notice any similarities here? That's Kali on the right, and that's the Dahomey warrior on the left. What do you see as similar? Yeah, the head, right. Taking heads. They're good at it. This is Durga. This is this is the idol god worship that women created about 40,000 years ago. All right, and Durga was a manifestation of the Most High. Okay, and if you notice, there's very little that she has in her hands that's pleasant, but she's always got a smile. This was before the 5th century. Remember, the word God only came along in the 5th century. which is around the year 400, and it came from the German word good. And it was a transitive verb. So now the personification of the Most High is masculine. Now you'll hear it being said as he this and him, but 40,000 years ago it was her this and her and she, right? But it's been changed. But idol God worship is still idol God worship. The Most High doesn't have agenda, in theory. And if it did have agenda, well, some think it looked like that. Man and woman should not compete against each other. Job. Then answered the Lord unto Job out of the whirlwind and said, Gird up thy loins now like a man. I will demand of thee and declare thou unto me. Now, what do you think girdeth up thy loins like a man means? Wrap it up. Men and women were separated, okay? Men had their thing and women had their thing. Women took care of domestic affairs and men took care of the foreign affairs. Men had to do with trade, whatever was happening within the country, the women took care of that. They did not compete against each other and they did not get into each other's realm of sphere of influence. Where do you think the word testify and testimony comes from? That's right, testicles. Because if you don't have no testicles, you can't testify. And if you testify falsely, you lose your testicles. Right, women can't testify. Just want you to know, we have rules. You need to have testicles in order to testify. And women cannot testify. So we had to make rules, you know, you have your game over there, men have their game over there, but never compete. Black's Law Dictionary, 6th edition, testare, testere, Latin, in the civil law, to testify, to attest, to declare, publish, or make known a thing before a witness, to make a will. So when you see in the Bible, when they're talking about girdeth up thy loins, well, that means you better be telling the truth, because if you're not telling the truth, you're going to lose something. Lord God made man first. Why? Because it's easier to deal with the male of the species than it is the female of the species. Lord God needed someone to work in the garden. So in Genesis 2:7, and the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. And the Lord God planted a garden eastward of Eden, and there he put the man of which he had formed. Right. If you want a worker, you want somebody who you can just train, you know, like Lord God needed somebody to train. So he's like, okay, we'll do this with the male. And why is it so easy to do it with the male? Because the female has this thing going on with her. Every 28 days the moon goes around, and every 28 days she has her cycle. That's not a coincidence. It is much easier to get a male to cooperate than a female. In the case of the woman, she has a 28-day cycle, and the moon has a 28-day cycle. This is no coincidence. PMS gives meaning to the term lunacy. Lunacy. Insanity, especially insanity relieved intermittently by periods of clear-mindedness. See symptoms at insanity. Synonyms at insanity. Thank you. A, great or wild foolishness. B, a wildly foolish act. Archaic meaning. Intermittent mental derangement associated with the changing phases of the moon. Now, why would you want a worker like that? Queendom. Within any social grouping of females, there is usually the alpha class female. And the alpha class female is usually considered the queen, because queendom is in nature, and it's also in culture. But one thing that does not cross the line from culture to nature is the kingdom. There is no king bee, there is no king ant, there is no king termite. Among bees, there is one queen to a hive. That is the alpha female. Before the end of her life, the worker bees, which are female, feed royal jelly to a number of eggs in order to produce a new queen. The first queen to hatch kills the other queens. Queens are also found among ants, termites, wasps, and hornets. The alpha female wolf is the only one that gives birth. And in nature, it's mostly a matriarchy. Alpha class females are the builders of civilization. When I say that, I'll give you an example of an alpha female. There's a group of ants in the continent of Africa called siafu, or driver ants. One female, who is the alpha female, lays 20 million eggs. These soldier ants, worker ants, and she knows everybody. If they have a war or a battle and she loses a few soldiers, she'll make some more. All right? Queendom crosses the line between nature and culture. Among human beings, some women are alpha female. Those are queens. And some are workers. Those are Cinderellas. Okay? A movie that characterizes an alpha female is I'm No Angel, story, screenplay, and dialogue by Mae West. Budweiser did a series on warrior queens of Africa. If a woman is a queen, then she already has a throne. She's not looking to get with somebody who has a throne. That would be a Cinderella. Okay? And alphas and Cinderellas are different. They just walk different paths. All right? And you only see an alpha female when you get to a social grouping, because otherwise you can't tell who's an alpha if they're by themselves. But when you put them together, you will find that when they work in an office, all of the women's cycles will begin to line up because they're creating an alpha, or an alpha will surface. When the alpha surfaces, she gets the visions and the other ones come to assist. All right? Now, when it comes to males and females, the male is unfortunately expendable, because the expression is women and children first. What does that mean? That means if she's walking 5 steps behind the male, that means they're shooting from the front and he takes the bullet. Okay? If she's walking 5 steps ahead of him, that means what? They're shooting from the back and he takes the bullet. This is the reason why he gets to sit at the head of the table and gets the big piece of chicken, because he's the one waving goodbye. And she will make another one who just looks just like him. And that ends presentation.